man. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Appreciate you doing the show. Um,
Absolutely.
I'm loving the new album you got out now, and I've been following what you're doing with Butcher Brown for a while. So it's good to talk to another member of the Butcher Brown crew. How's everything been going in the Richmond music scene? Are you guys still gigging strong, or is COVID kind of putting things on hold right now?
Well, we did the shows the 2 days after Thanksgiving, and those were sold out. Those were the last Butcher Brown shows. Um, we were able to squeak in a European tour, but I don't think we have anything else coming up for a little while. Seems like the timing was aligned with what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I'm just starting to have stuff canceled again myself. So it seems like winter things might be on hold. But is that does that have you back in the studio working on new music? I mean, you've already got four new albums, well, three and an EP out this year, right? Just you alone.
Right, right.
So is that a result of like the pandemic where you just were you focusing more on making music that way, or is that just always how you've been about like putting out material that way?
That's not well. As far as releasing material, that's not always how I've operated in the past. But as far as production, yeah, I have been making creations for a while. Um, but the pandemic has definitely shifted the focus on the studio. I feel like for me, the studio has never really left the focus
Yeah,
because I always try to keep it as like I think of it as water that everything else is kind of sitting in. And so it just kind of shows up wherever it can, wherever it can. But pandemic has definitely made it so that well now I can focus on building a proper studio.
yeah. Well, I mean, I have a lot of questions about your how you got into where you are now with your project Tennishu and Butcher Brown, but I kind of wanted to start from
Oh
the
yeah,
beginning and ask like how you originally got into music and what were your influences growing up. Like, so do you have like a early memory of your first like music you were hearing?
definitely. Early music for me was a lot of funk, a lot of hip hop, a lot of R&B, and like a lot of classic stable music like Stevie Wonder, Earth, Wind and
Yeah,
Fire, all of that. You know what I mean? Like the Whispers. I was tweet somebody like I saw somebody tweeted the other day. They were like, "What's your favorite Whisper song?" And I'm like, "I know it's one of the most famous ones, but Lost and Turned Out."
who
Um,
who is it? The
but you know,
Whispers?
the Whispers, yeah,
Yeah, I'm not even familiar with them. I mean, I love a lot of the other stuff you named, but I guess I got a new thing to check
beautiful,
out.
classic group, classic records. Their records just make you feel at home, and they're just very like easy to listen to. It's classic music, but that's the stuff because my dad was a heavy music, and so he used to drive between cities like Philadelphia to DC, Philly to New York. He was not afraid to just get up and go drive to another city. So sometimes he would drag me along in the car, and we would listen to hours of just funk music. But then I also, on my own, was into hip hop because he was not into hip hop at all.
Oh, okay. Like about what age did you start like branching off into your own tastes?
Um, the first, it was around the time I got my first hip hop record, which was ODB's Return to the 36 Chambers.
Nice,
It was
classic.
like, I think I was like 7.
And were you hooked right away from that record?
I was crazy hooked because, like, at that time, my dad had musical taste. My dad's sister had great musical taste. My dad's mother had great musical taste. My cousin Nia had great musical taste. And so they all had their kind of own way of listening. Like on Saturdays, when grandma was around the house, we'd be listening to what she wanted to listen to. So there was a lot of gospel, a lot of R&B, Nita Baker
Yeah,
type stuff. That was about as worldly as she got. But then when aunt was in the car, cousin was in the car, we would venture off into like Q Sweat, R. Kelly, all this other stuff that was going on at that time. And then, on my own with the boys, we over here listening to Wu Tang, we listening to Jay Z, we listening to all of this different stuff. So it was a very interesting like spread of music that I was getting
Now,
from like from individual people, which was also crazy.
now, did your family hear Old Dirty Bastard and like were they put off by it or like open to
Yep,
it or?
they were not with that at
Yeah,
all.
I mean that's such an interesting person to start with because he's got such a like iconic style that I feel like it for the average listener would probably be hard to wrap your head around right away. Because to me,
Right.
he's like he he's kind of like the Thelonious Monk of rap to me,
Yep.
just because he's so intentional about his style and like he clearly has the chops and the historical significance, but it's to the average listener, I feel like it's not like a first listen and you get it kind of thing.
Right. Right. I was blown away by it. I couldn't believe. I was like, because at that time I had only the records that I listened to had come from the older people in my family. So there was a certain like buttoned up nature to them.
Yeah,
And to hear that record, and I was like, yo, what? He's saying all this on this record? This is crazy. And I'm 7. I'm like 7 or 8. Way young. I think my aunt, one of my other aunts bought it for me because she knew that that's what the kids were listening to, and she just was, trying to shoot for something that I thought she thought I would like.
she probably
She,
heard ODB say Wu Tang is for the children
exactly,
when he crashed the Grammys or whatever.
exactly, yeah. And so I think that record itself shaped a lot of stuff for me, just because it let me know how far you can go, really early on.
did
So
you
that's the way.
did you recognize right away like how did that like feel like a emblem of hip hop to you, or did it kind of show right away like, oh, you need to have your own style?
Um, it it showed me that it showed me what people were really connecting to.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like when people, because like at first when I listened to records, I thought it sounded cool. That's why I wanted to listen to it. But I had no idea that like other people were listening to this stuff. Um, I had no idea that these records were as big as they were. I didn't know that these records had been around as long as they had been around. And so when I'm listening to this stuff, I have no historical context. I have no scaling context. At that time, I was just listening to it, and the sounds were crazy. The lo-fi-ness, it just made it. It just sounded. The productions that the RZA was doing, they sounded like the environment that I was in at that time, and that's the thing that made it so interesting to me. Because like I was really a visually stimulated kid,
Yeah.
and so you know what I mean. I remember reading lots of books where we had like pictures and words in it, like, but they were thicker books, and I would always shoot for those. And I was like, I remember trying to explain to the teacher, I was like, it's nice to have the text first and then a diagram,
Well, I
and then
feel
that's kind of what that rap music was. You know what I mean?
well all those early RZA records, Enter the 36 Chambers, that Tikal, Method Man's first record, they're like movies. I feel
Yeah,
like
they're movies.
the
They're
way
all
he,
connected. It's kind of like Marvel. Like
yeah,
once you get deeper in it, you realize, oh, Method Man and the Chef did this. Oh, Ghostface and such and such did. Oh, they're part of it. Oh, they're doing movies too. It's a TV. It's like Marvel esque in a way.
well, yeah, it's like a genre within hip hop, and then if you put it in the context of hip hop, I mean, most hip hop is kind of the same way. The way people are making their characters and their styles, and they're telling like their stories. I mean, I like to
Right.
think of like, oh, if you look at the landscape of the industry today, like um, if you wanted to assign a role to people, it's like, oh, you could say, oh, I don't know, Drake is like a more like heroic archetype, whereas someone like Travis Scott is like a more like villain of the industry kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they all play like kind of an epic role in the direction the history of hip hop is going.
Right, because everybody today culturally is interested in that larger story.
Yeah.
Like I remember going to see the Man Ray exhibit at the VMFA, and one of the things that I realized was like he really got like plugged up when he met Cocteau. Because Cocteau was so like multi-skilled, multi-hyphenated, multi-skilled, that he knew so many people. So as soon as Man Ray met with Cocteau, it was lights out, and his scene was ever pervasive. And I feel like people like to see that. They like to see not only is this guy great, but he also knows this guy who's also great, who also knows this guy, and they three do this. And like the stacking kind of Lego style culture is the thing now, I feel like.
Yeah, I love like that background history of like how the records came together, but also just musically hearing this sample came from here. They're quoting this rapper's lyric here. I love the way it all fits together like that. Like I don't know, like listening to new records is like a puzzle. Like just the way it all kind of I hear a quote somewhere that I recognize, and that makes me like the record that much more.
Right.
Like one of my
And there's
favorite.
so many.
Sorry, one of my favorite things to hear quoted is like Slick Rick's and Dougie Fresh's Lottie Dottie in the show, because they appear in so many things. It just shows how powerful the influence is.
Right. And it's crazy that it sticks with who it sticks with too, because it's all raw imagination.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's the thing that like for me, what rapping and trumpet and saxophone have in common is it's raw imagination. And so like once you start freestyling, that's like real time window into like what your brain is doing. And if you use words, then that makes it that much more valid in a sense, just because you're literally, that's what's happening when people are reading books.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of words flying by, and the picture is getting constructed subconsciously through many mechanisms that are online in your brain. And it all is affected by your experiences, your emotions, and your situation. Which is kind of nuts to think about, but it is. I feel like it is just that simple.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's harder to describe with like instrumental music because it's you can't always put it into words, but whatever you're listening to, I feel like it paints a picture. Like before you listened to Old Dirty Bastard, were you into jazz already, or did you have any particular favorite instrumental music?
I didn't even know what it was.
So that came
no
after hip hop for you.
Jazz came when I got to 11th grade, because my band director at that time, she was really tapped in with the Lincoln Center revival. So like I guess around that time, Lincoln Center was like reviving the library at Duke Ellington. And so they were like republishing a lot of the tracks, and they were making them available in different grades for public school children to play. And so my director was getting these tracks and bringing them down, and me and the homies in the band program were playing these Duke Ellington songs. And we had been listening to a lot of rap music, which is high octane. I feel like it's not as high octane as you can get, but it's pretty high up there.
Yeah.
Especially today, but back then it was a lot of high octane music we were into, and so Duke Ellington had like these voicings that really struck chords, and I feel like we really dialed in on it. So for me, I got into it listening to songs like Coco, Arabesque Cookie from the Far East Suite, and like I started hearing these songs, I had no idea what this stuff was. But that's when I started getting interested in jazz, and then the opportunity at VCU to go to the jazz program opened up. And then that's how I got into jazz, through improvisation.
Now, when did you start playing instruments? Was that like elementary school, middle school?
That was middle school. I started playing trumpet in 11th grade. I wanted to play saxophone, but there were too many saxophone players, so they made me pick another instrument.
But when did you start playing saxophone then?
Like when I was 20. when I was
Oh,
20
okay.
or 21. I kind of circled back on that. I wanted to do it in high school. They said no. I wanted to do it in middle school. They said no. Wanted to play in college. They said no.
Yeah.
So then I just graduated college. I was like, I'm going to play now. There's no one else to say no.
Yeah. So is trumpet still like, because of all those years, is trumpet still your primary by far, or is it pretty close? Like how do you feel
It's,
about the
it's
two now?
pretty it's pretty close. My knowledge about trumpet is more extensive, of course, but as far as abilities, I feel like it's pretty close.
Yeah.
I need to get better on both. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. So were you writing raps before you were playing instruments then?
No, I started writing raps around like 13, 14.
Okay.
Because I had I can't remember what program it was, but it was on one of the computers that my father set up for me to use at the school. And so I used to take like instrumentals, like there's a song called Warrior by Lloyd Banks, and there's a section in the back end of it where it's just like 8 bars of instrumental. I just cut the back of it off, and I looped it, and then I would start writing some raps to it. And I had a whole album on this computer, and I have not asked him yet. Well, I don't know. I don't think he did, but somehow I got lost in translation. My first like rap album. It was like I wrote it when I was 14,
Yeah.
but it just got lost. And then I didn't. I started focusing on jazz more.
Now before I go into like college and getting into professional music, were there any other arts when you were younger that you were passionate about or like pursued any skill in?
No, because I was in the when I was playing trumpet, I was in all the bands that you could be in or that I knew of.
Okay.
Like I never really did like all district as much. I definitely didn't do all state, but I was in the jazz band, the stage band, the marching band, the show choir band,
Yeah.
jamming at night after school with the fellas band. All of those different things were keeping me busy with music, so I was just in there with that.
Is there like another art that if you had to go into something else that like has always seemed kind of romantic to you, like, oh, it would be cool to be this sort of artist?
Uh, Movie production.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I am interested in and taking active steps to get into it.
You are
I
taking the
definitely
steps?
want to. Yeah, I'm taking steps right now. I want to learn how it works the same way I learned how music production works, because I feel like they're very similar industries, and one fits nicely inside of the other.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I definitely would like to circle back to some talk about movies then. But to get back on, your education in music, how did you feel about your experience in college? Because I feel like these days I hear a lot of musicians have kind of mixed experiences. Maybe they get some access to good resources, but a lot of the time I feel like in an art context, the like bureaucracy of a college can kind of get in the way. Like, were you happy with your experience in college?
In hindsight, yes. I was very happy because it forced me to do a lot of things that I was not comfortable with doing, A, and B, would probably not have been doing otherwise. It contributed to the openness of my musical palette because I experienced and heard a lot of things that I had not seen, probably would not have experienced otherwise.
Okay. Now, where was the college located? I meant to ask earlier. Did you grow up around Richmond, or is that a more recent thing for you? Where did school have you located, and are you still close with that music scene?
I grew up in Richmond. I moved here when I was 8,
Okay.
so just before 5th grade, I believe, something like that, or maybe 11. No, I moved here when I was 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then college was
So
where?
college was at VCU.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that, I mean, I think it so many thoughts. I'm not as connected with that scene as I would have liked to have been in the past. When I was connected with that scene and I was doing adjunct professorship via small jazz ensemble and jazz orchestra too, it was a lot just because I had started making a transition from local musician to more national, international musician.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of touring, and so I kind of had to like really understand time management in the way that some of the professors that I had when I was younger were dealing with, and I didn't really understand. So I was like seeing a lot of different things, and I had a lot of different opinions on VCU through the years. But I think to circle back to your previous question, yes, it was a good experience. No, I'm not connected to those people as much.
Yeah.
Things move in waves.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I feel pretty similar about my music school experience because I don't regret it, but obviously I had my qualms with it, but it's I don't know. I feel like that's just what it is. I mean, you whether you go or not, I feel like there's going to be some experience like that. But when you were in that environment and you started learning about, obviously Duke Ellington you said was like one of the first jazz artists you heard. Who was the first player you really connected with that like made you want to learn that language and that style on your horn?
The first trumpet player and like musician I really heard was Miles Davis. Back when I first started playing, but the guy that really wanted me, that got me wanting to get to a high level on his instruments was listening to Freddie Hubbard.
Yeah. Was there a particular Freddie Hubbard record?
There's a lot of them. But I think the one that really sticks out for me is Cascades on Blues and the Abstract Truth.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some Bill Evans stuff too, though. It's crazy because he's a musician that went through phases, and so there's so many classic sounds from him. Sometimes it's hard to know, but I would say Cascades, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I think one of the earliest records I got into with jazz was Wayne Shorter's "Speak No Evil," and his playing on that sticks with me probably the most, just because of Go on.
To me, that was like the Cascades phase was like, to me, that was just like bullets. Like, we're just going to show everyone how well we can work this trumpet.
Yeah.
But then, like, that Speak No Evil phase, to me, is like, oh, now, we know how to use a trumpet, but now we're going to, like, work the music. Because he's playing, like, lyrical stuff on there that's not like any of the other things that he had played in the past.
Yeah, I mean, those tunes are all... I mean, Wayne Shorter is one of my favorite composers, especially in that style. And I feel like he kind of has this like otherworldly sound. Like he's like an alien. Like it doesn't quite align with other stuff. And I don't know if it's like having to work with the kind of odd chord changes that he uses or what, like in that period that might have like changed how everyone was playing. But I feel like overall on that record, everyone is being very lyrical. Like it doesn't sound conventional, but it's all very... It's they're not like showing off. It's all just very very like beautiful playing. I don't know. I love that record so much.
And also on I think Speak No Evil.
Yeah.
Track. This the interplay that's going on between everybody. It's like all of those musicians are people that when they're playing with somebody, they make the band sound better because their skills are so strong. Herbie Hancock, Freddie Hubbard, Wayne Shorter, and it's like when you put all of them together, it makes this like communicative like membrane.
Yeah.
It's like, one human is good, but then we have four humans, imaginations, and logical minds operating on the same plane through the same music. It gets very wild, I feel like, and like all those recordings especially when Wayne was writing, when Wayne was leading the band, just have these colors that just don't really show up anywhere else, I feel like.
Yeah. Now, on saxophone, do you have any particular big influences?
Yes. Seamus Blake. That was the first guy. Seamus Blake, Chris Potter, Marcus Strickland.
Yeah.
But Seamus Blake, he came to VCU in 2005. He was a guest artist per Skip Gales' request. Skip Gales was a saxophone professor at the time. And so he had requested that Seamus be the guest artist. That was the first time I had heard. You know, it's one thing to hear your teachers, but then it's another thing to hear a professional, like pro tenor player who's been on the road, and he comes in and he plays in the big band room. And like his sound just kind of, it was the biggest, craziest thing I've ever heard. And that was when I was like, whoa, saxophone.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my high school band teacher, Mike Benedict, brought in like Gary Smulyan my senior year in high school, and I mean, he tore it up. I mean, it's crazy to see people who are like international come in, and when you've like really haven't even heard that much, like I don't know.
Gary Smulyan's another one. And then Ronnie Cuber.
Who?
Ronnie Cuber.
Yeah.
He played Barry in the Mingus Big Band. A lot of those guys went to the Mingus Big Band. That's kind of how I found out about
them. Now, what's like the most surprising turn we can take on your influences here? Like, who's someone that you are passionate about that I would not expect at all from the rest of this conversation?
Like, music-wise, you mean?
Yeah. Like for me, it's like, oh, if I wanted to go another direction right now, I'm a huge Frank Zappa nerd. Or like, I really, Garth Brooks, "Friends in Low Places" is my. I'm not a big country guy, but that song is my jam. Like, what's a very abrupt turn in your influences that I would not expect?
Oh man, I don't really have any. I mean, I've been on LCD Sound System for a minute. That's like the furthest outside.
Yeah.
Their vibe. I just been on songwriters lately. Like I just been kind of trying to study songwriters and just see how they put their compositions together. But yeah, I don't have no left fields like that. Oh,
okay.
I wish I did.
All right. Well, how about this? I saw an interview with you and I think it was you and DJ Harrison, and you guys had just got some records from a record store, and you had a Merle Haggard record. I think you said I think you said your grandma used to listen to a lot of Merle Haggard, and you were gonna try to get into him. Did that ever come of anything? Did you listen to that record a lot?
It did, and like one thing that I listened to that record. The thing with vinyl is like I listened to it all the way through, but then like I go to the streaming sites and just hit it there just so I could play it in different places. And so I checked out a bunch of stuff. I got a lot of drum influence from those records. Like I pulled more like sonic influences off of those more than anything. And musically, I think the biggest thing was just patience, which is what it's kind of what I expected, but I just didn't understand how it would come about and like to what degree I would really pick that up from those records. But the lyrics are patient, and like you could tell like you could just tell a lot of stuff was put into those things.
Yeah.
So those are the things I kind of grabbed from that.
Okay. That's cool. All right. Well, I'm almost ready to circle back to the talk of movies, but I do want to ask. I ask the musicians on the show a lot because I have some comedians on the show sometimes. I like to ask them what music they like, but I'm a big stand-up comedy nerd, and I'd love to know what kind of stand-up comedy you're into.
Who's the last? I mean, I watched the Chappelle joints.
Of course.
That's the last stand-up joints I watched. Um, I don't know. I feel like I need to do more research in that field because I used to love stand up. Like I always go back to the old Kevin Hart's,
Yeah.
and then I go back to the old Kevin Hart's. I go back to the old Dave Chappelle's, obviously the old Chris Rock joints. Like I've kind of been watching like the Lewis Black joints I was watching the other day. But I like the more sophisticated. I like the sophisticated comedy that is not scared to say what they want to say.
Yeah. Well, I mean
And
that's
these days and times, I feel like that polarizes everyone to the more larger figures. So I feel like I end up missing, just like, streaming sites, they'll polarize you to larger figures versus the more main, regular people. So I'm like, I'm out of touch with who's actually on the comedy circuit, but I do like stand up.
yeah. Well, if you ever need recommendations, I got you. But if you're listening to Chappelle, I mean
Yes.
Chappelle's my favorite, so that's a good place to start.
Yeah. He's
Um,
brilliant. I
yeah.
think he's brilliant.
Um, and like you said, that like being unafraid to say what you want to say and having some level of sophistication. I feel like he does that probably the most artfully because he's like a storyteller also, and he's just a beautiful orator. He's a
Right.
great speaker, you know. Um,
Yeah. Because I mean, I feel like his edginess is appropriate for society. Like
yeah,
there has to be people who laugh at these quote unquote laugh at these things and say this is this is crazy or this is whatever. Because I feel like if we don't have that, we'll get swept in the speed of life, just like we were right before the pandemic. I feel like we're thinking about so many different things that would have not even came close to the surface if we would have still been rolling on that path before.
yeah,
And so I think it's important to have people like that. The same reason why it's important to have people who make records and are crazy, or people who have podcasts that interview controversial figures. It's like we got to really think about what we're doing because it's tape that's printed to, and we can't erase it.
yeah,
It's called life.
yeah. Um, do you feel like someone like Dave Chappelle, as big of a artist and character he is, do you think that has an influence on you as a rapper? And I mean,
Yes,
where do you think your character as a rapper comes from?
my character as a rapper comes more from like what I've been going through in my life and how it reflects like how I see the world. And like I also Dave Chappelle to me is an inspiration just because on many levels. I mean, he's a black man who's successful. That's one thing that I look at him with respect for. He's successful. He gets up on stage with no fear, or at least he can present himself in such a way with confidence that other people believe in him. That to me is a respectable trait. He's
Yeah,
popular, and I think that all of those things definitely influence me because, like, just moving through these things, especially like leveling up in a way throughout my career and all of this other stuff. I just want to make sure that I'm doing things like in a way that's sustainable because it's so easy to just kind of like take the whatever pill and go that way. And it's like, I feel like what I'm doing is a little bit bigger than what's been happening. And so I feel like Dave Chappelle is the same thing. I don't feel like he's just a regular comedian anymore. I feel like he is Dave Chappelle. Like he is a person that we just want to hear what he has to say. And I feel like he got there through constantly getting funnier and getting smarter and really paying attention to what he was going through. So I just try to take that assumption and just kind of put it on my scene in the most positive way.
yeah. I mean, I definitely see the parallel because I mean I feel like he got to that place, with what he went through with Chappelle show and everything because he had integrity and like you said,
Mm-hmm.
he was still trying to grow and keep it like real while that was all going down. And I think with that he's only gotten more respect, but also like a mystique that makes like the art even deeper. He's like, to me, he's kind of like the Kendrick Lamar of comedy. I feel,
Exactly.
I feel like they both have like really high standard for their work, and they're both very they care about the art. They're both very they are respected in like by the business. You know, they conduct themselves well, and I feel like they've both just kind of risen to the top.
Right. And I think that consistent behavior is the Bezos method. He got all these investors to invest in Amazon for 14 years with no profit. And then when they flipped the profit, everyone went home with $400 million or more. And that like basic gist of it, you know, that's a more long road way of thinking.
Yeah, I didn't even know about that with Amazon, but no surprise there.
As far as I know, that's the vibe. I need to like brush up on the story in whole, but I believe that is what, because I think he comes from a wealth management arena. So he was, or either that or some type of market analysis. And so he understood things about capital and flow coming out the gate, that he got a lot of high-powered people to believe in it for a long time. Because I remember reading articles where they weren't turning profit for years, but they kept investing. And I'm like, man, they really must see something crazy in this. And well, here we are.
Yeah, biggest name in the game.
A lot of people made a lot of money off that guy.
Come to think of it, Jeff Bezos is the Dave Chappelle of online marketing.
Exactly.
I guess.
You know what I mean? And I feel like the more great people I study, or I feel like I study and or become aware of, no matter what their status is, I feel like they operate off the same principles. Like, no matter what. Especially when it comes to their craft. They're like, their personal lives may be way different, their work lives may be way different on face value, but I feel like for me, I'm chasing things that resonate with their core values. They all use the same principles.
Yeah, I feel like there's a certain just lesson to be learned to anyone who's willing to like pursue something like that. Because whether you're an artist or a businessman, there is this sort of like ego-driven, just like hunger for success. You know, it's
Right.
like not settling for where you're at.
Not settling for where you're at, yeah. Just constantly letting it evolve.
Yeah.
That for me is kind of built in just because my nature is to be an improviser. So I just basically took the principles of jazz education and study and applied them to the rest of my life. So I'm just like, well, practicing trumpet is a never-ending struggle. Just like everything else in life. Cleaning the house, money management, time management, it's never-ending struggle.
Yep.
So I'm like, why don't I just take the same principles from over there and see how they work with time management and see how they work with this.
Or how they work with making movies, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah. Next possible venture to practice.
That is, yeah, that's literally what I'm doing with that. Is because I see so many similarities between the music industry and the movie industry. I kind of want to. I'm just at a point right now where I'm trying to understand how the business works, do some preliminary research, and then eventually start finding entry points into the industry. Because I think there's, from doing Mothership Monday with Richard Brown over the pandemic, and really like getting in tune with video editing software, which was a plus during quarantine. You start to see how these things are put together, especially with the more media I start to watch. So I become interested in like, you know, how to put things together, how things are presented, how styles are curated through things as little as like how long images last. Like, you know, watching different hip hop video directors, watching different movie producers, different TV shows. Really understanding how cameras play a role in all of this, all the way down to YouTube. I feel like YouTube is a movie theater in itself.
Yeah. Do you?
So once, you know, getting into with that stuff is kind of where I'm at with that.
Now, is that the kind of stuff that you see yourself getting the most like excited about? Like when you're watching, is it the little editing and like interesting tricks you see? Like I know like Kendrick Lamar's videos are so like brilliantly edited. Is it that? Is it the soundtrack? Is it the do actors excite you too?
They all of that stuff. Like I think the thing with these records is that since I spend so much time with it, I realize that the thing that drives me to make the record is that the images that I see with the record.
Yeah,
And the sounds are kind of a byproduct of what's happening in my mind when I'm making it and how I want the vibe to be and what I can picture it to be around. I like to use those peripheral associations um, because it helps me to flesh out more detailed parts within the music.
yeah,
And if I want to dictate a red card versus a blue card, then that to me is going to be a different sound, different sonics. I'm going to really be thinking that when I'm putting these things together. So I like to keep those things really lined up. So I think in realizing that, I was like, well, you know, get into movies, like make pieces for YouTube. That's kind of what I want to do.
yeah.
And I can curate the music, curate the vibe, obviously, and just kind of do what I can do with what I have because I feel like I can get creative with that.
Now, as far as movies go, what are your biggest influences in that realm?
Movies, Spike Lee's movies to me are really cool because there are shots and ways of shooting and ways of doing things in those movies that may or may not necessarily go with the cultural depiction that you're trying to get across. But to me, somehow he always made a way for whatever camera technique he was using to fit culturally, and it made sense. Because when I look at those movies, I can see those people in my mind in the places that I've been. I'm like, these people are real, obviously, but the angle actually catches it too where you would be looking. Which I'm like, man, that's a level of detail that is very intricate.
Yeah,
And so, like thinking about that and like watching his movies versus watching Tarantino's movies, he also has ways of laying things out and creating suspense and moving things around where it doesn't. You don't get cheesy vibes. You don't get weird vibes. You get like the point of the story, and you can follow along, and you know what type of ride you're in for because he's got such a strong style.
yeah, and I feel like there's so many little details within creating those effects that it's like an album where you can rewatch it and you
Right,
find new things. You recognize those techniques.
right. And
Uh,
but it's still in the style of whoever. It never like takes you away from their party. It just shows you the rest of the stuff that was going on.
yeah. What about TV shows?
TV shows, I've been watching everything from, I watch Squid Games because that's number one on Netflix, but then I also been watching, I've been watching like Fresh Prince,
Okay.
um, like the original Fresh Prince, like the
Yeah.
first couple of seasons in particular, because like the way that Quincy put that show together is crazy. And that's an example to me also of a music producer that is producing a TV show. And like he just had like this high quality way of doing things. And I think about the consistency of that show, and I think about how loved that show was in my household growing up. And I'm like, he did that just by the placement of those images. He made people understand how to get through life just by learning how to manipulate that.
Yeah.
So it's
Um,
crazy.
yeah. I mean, that's why I love getting into like the other forms of art. I mean, even within talking to musicians, I feel like there's so many influences that go into making like you the type of artist that you are. Um, But I don't know. It's really cool to get to pick your
Yeah.
brain, man. I really appreciate you doing the show. Can you talk a little bit about what else is coming up next year with your solo stuff and with Butcher Brown?
Coming up, so I have a remix that was done by my homie El Andre. It's coming out on January 1st. That'll be dropping on streaming sites and whatnot all over the internet. And then on January 21st, I'll be dropping a remix of a song that I did called Good Night with some homies of mine. But I'm gonna let that reveal itself when the song drops. But then getting ready with Butcher. We hitting the Blue Note at the end of February, and we got a couple other opportunity irons in the fire. So we just want to see what is. I think 2022 is gonna be real bright, and
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to moving ahead.
Yeah. Well, congrats on the new album, Three Sides. I
Thank you.
hope the listeners check it out. It sounds
Shout out
amazing.
to Scott Lane over in South Florida. Or left hand, excuse me.
Yeah.
Left hand over in South Florida. That was a great record. I had a great time working with him on that record. We put that together. Chance Fisher, Tamika Cook, Sam Reed, DJ Harrison. We was in there.
Yeah, man. Well, I can't wait to hear more. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk. And
Absolutely.
well, you're always welcome back if you got more stuff to promote. But I hope to see a show soon. Um,
Awesome.
but yeah, man, thank you again.
All right, thank you.